Here's a quick look at different cables that you would encounter in live sound. This is a range of basic cables. It's by no means completely extensive. I'm not going to look at every single cable that you'll ever find in live sound, but there's a selection of some here, and it'll help build up your technical vocab. Okay, so cables and leads can essentially be grouped into sort of two categories. If they're an audio cable, that is balanced and unbalanced. The difference between them, an unbalanced cable has got two wires in the inside of it, as you can see here. This is an unbalanced jack lead. This is a jack connector going to some bare wire at the end. So unbalanced cables are okay. They're okay to use on short runs if you're running some sound from one piece of equipment to another over a short distance. But to improve quality and sound quality, and to get a better signal to noise ratio and less interference, then you deal with balanced cables. Now, balanced cables are slightly different. They don't have, if I just dismantle very quickly this XLR cable, this is a microphone cable, a balanced microphone cable, which has been nicely soldered and put together by there we go. And if we have a look inside here, it's quite hard to see there on the camera, but there are three cables inside there, a hot, a cold for carrying in the signal, and a screen cable as well. The screen cable runs a core around the outside of the black and blue cables that you can see here, and that actually eliminates any kind of interference jumping onto the cables. Now, balanced cables are quite important in live sound because there are lots of potential other noise sources that can jump and interfere onto the audio signal, such as using lighting rigs, for example, alongside audio cables. They can be notoriously buzzy. So using balanced, properly screened, high quality cables is going to give you a better quality of sound. So balanced cables if possible, unbalanced cables if that's all you can get access to. Okay, so we've got different connector types. Already had a look at this lead. This is what's called a 1/4 inch jack. It's a mono or unbalanced jack. You can tell that by looking at the end of the jack here. It's got one ring going around the outside of it, which signifies that it is mono. When I compare it to another cable I have here, which is also a jack lead, you can see there that one has got two cables running around it. It's stereo or a balanced jack lead. So that is different types of jack cable. 1/4 inch jacks. Now they're going to be used in live sound for plugging in line inputs such as various instruments into a DI box or straight into the mixing desk, possibly for connecting effects units up as well. We come over to a microphone cable, which more technically is known as an XLR cable. Two different types of connectors on the end, one with prongs, that's called the male end, and one with holes, which is called the female end. So we've got a male XLR and female XLR connector on both ends. The female end, that goes into the microphone, and the other end plugs into your mixing desk or stage box. So those are balanced microphone cables, XLR cables, more technically kind of known as. Okay, there's another cable here, and this has got a slightly different connector on the end, which looks like this. Okay, now this is a speak-on connector, and it's used for plugging in speakers, plugging into amplifiers or into speakers. It's again, it's a balanced cable, and these connectors actually lock into place when you plug them into the back of an amplifier or into a speaker, which is, you know, a bit more hard wearing, more secure, can't accidentally be pulled out of the device. So it's really a kind of, it's a protective type of connector really. Sturdy, hard wearing, good for live sound use. So that's the speak-on connector, speak-on cable for plugging in speakers. Okay. Bit of a mess here. Okay. Here we have what's called a loom. And a loom is just basically a bunch of cables clumped together. In this case we've got jack leads, stereo jack leads. A loom doesn't have to be jack leads, it could be a bunch of XLR cables grouped together, but in this case we've got a small loom. It's called an 8-way loom because there's 8 cables running through one thick cable. Now this would be used for plugging in multiple devices, maybe multiple effects units into the mixing desk. That's the sort of thing that you would tend to use a loom for. Kind of more common really in the recording studio than in live sound, but certainly if you're using lots of outboard devices, then a nice tidy loom will keep things organised and tidy. These colour-coded looms, sometimes they're number-coded, but it's quite easy to see which leads match up at the end. So in this case the green on one end matches the green on the other end. So that's called a wiring loom. Okay. Here's an example of another wiring loom. Rather intimidating looking huge thing, but quite simple really. They're all labelled up, and it's just a bunch of cables grouped together. Again, that's a jack loom. Okay, standard instrument cable, a jack to 1/4 inch jack to jack lead. Again, this is mono, this is an unbalanced jack cable. This is pretty bog standard for most line level instruments. A jack to jack lead. Okay, and we get to this cable. Okay, this is called a phono cable, or an RCA cable more accurately. It's used for stereo devices such as CD players, MP3 players may have this kind of thing on it. And you can plug it into your mixing desk into the 2-track input. It's usually a phono connection on your mixing desk for quick access to 2-track devices. You can get all sorts of converters and things for cables. If you didn't want a phono, then we can turn it into a monophonic jack, 1/4 inch jack, by putting the connectors on the end. There's a whole variety of different connections for changing cables. So here we have a multi-core cable. Well, this end of the multi-core cable is called the stage box. Now the stage box is made up of input channels for plugging in your microphones. In this case this is a 24 channel stage box, so we could plug in 24 sound sources from stage, 24 microphones for example. And then these return lines in red allow us to return sound back from the mixing desk back down to the stage, and out of these outputs we could plug in for example monitors, a selection of amplifiers that maybe powering your main speakers for your audience. Okay, on the other end of the cable, all those cables then connect into a very hardware, a very large loom cable where they're all grouped together. So in total we have nearly sort of 30 or so, 32 cables running through this particular multi-core. On the other end of the cable we have a bunch of leads that would plug into your mixing desk. Now these are all balanced XLR connections. We've got male connectors, and those are all labelled up. In this case we've got channel number 21 here, so that would be the microphone that is plugged into 21 on the stage box, and you would plug that into maybe channel 21 input on your mixing desk if you're using a large sort of 24 channel mixer. The return lines coming back from the mixing desk are conveniently red in colour, and instead of numbers these are labelled up with letters, which corresponds over on the stage box. You can see F is here, and there would be an F red lead as well. And these are female connectors because usually the outputs from a mixing desk, whether they're group outputs for monitors or master mix outputs, well, the left and right would usually be for a female connector. So that is a very quick overview of 24 channel 24-way multi-core cable used in live sound.